Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. They tried to bury her, not knowing she was a seed. The projector screen flickered, then froze mid-slide, erasing the months she'd spent preparing. The data she'd compiled, the prototypes she'd mapped out, the market analysis she'd run late into too many nights. Gone. Just a blank blue screen and her own reflection staring back at her. A heartbeat of silence, then, from the other end of the long walnut table, a slow, sarcastic clap. "Well," said Brad, the CFO, leaning back in his leather chair with a smug grin, "that was enlightening." A few quiet snickers echoed around the room. A couple of executives exchanged smirks, the kind that weren't meant to be hidden. Her breath caught in her throat. She felt like a deer cornered in front of wolves wearing Brioni suits. Natalie Reyes, 29, project manager with 3 degrees, had spent 5 years clawing her way into this room, only to be gutted in 10 seconds. "Excuse me," she said, forcing a breath. "I think the system just—" "No need," said Brad. "We got the gist. I'm sure IT will be thrilled to fix it later." Another chuckle from the room. One of the younger interns looked down at his notepad, trying not to be seen smiling. Natalie's fingers tightened around the clicker in her hand. She wanted to scream, to tell them that her presentation was solid, revolutionary even, that her AI logistics model could reduce costs by 22% across departments, that she'd spent nights sleeping on the office couch because she believed in this, but her voice felt strangled by a lump in her throat that tasted like salt. Across the room, Marla, the only other woman in the room, refused to meet her. Eyes, typical. In this place, allies disappeared fast when sharks circled. Natalie turned back to the frozen screen. Her mind raced. Should she plug in her backup drive? Try the whiteboard? "You can email us later, sweetheart," Brad said, rising from his chair and adjusting his cufflinks like he'd just closed a deal. "Right now, we've got more pressing pitches." That word, sweetheart, landed like a slap. She blinked, awed, refusing to let a single tear fall, and that's when the side door opened, not the main door. His door. The private, always closed, never used side door that connected directly to the 44th floor penthouse office, the one no one entered. Unless summoned, the room froze, and there he was, Gabriel Thorne, the elusive, enigmatic billionaire CEO of Thorne Global Industries, 6'2", dressed in a storm grey coat, hair just slightly unruly, face carved like he'd walked out of an art exhibit on dominance. His eyes, those steel blue eyes, scanned the room with quiet violence. No one had seen him in weeks. Rumor was he was in Dubai finalizing a global merger. He wasn't scheduled to return until next quarter. He wasn't supposed to be here, but he was. And he walked right past every executive, straight to Natalie, and stood beside her without a word. Brad's face paled. "Mr. Thorne, sir, we didn't know you'd—" "I'm aware," Gabriel said, his voice calm but cutting. "Carry on." Brad blinked. "Sir?" "She wasn't finished," he said, glancing at Natalie. "Keep going." Natalie's hands trembled, but not from humiliation anymore. This time it was something else. Hope. She looked up at the screen, still frozen. "Do it without the slides," Gabriel said quietly, his tone lowering for her alone. "Just speak." Her throat felt dry, but she nodded. She turned back to the room and began again. "My proposal," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, "is an overhaul of our current logistics model. Using predictive AI mapping, we can automate shipment routes, reduce time delays, and save over $48 million in the next fiscal year." The smirks began to fade. Some execs shifted uncomfortably. Gabriel stepped back, arms crossed, listening like a hawk. Not a word, not a blink, just fierce attention. Natalie found her rhythm, her voice rising. She quoted figures, explained risks, projected timelines. She painted a vision not just of efficiency, but of dominance, how TGI could outrun Amazon. In key sectors within 2 years. By the time she finished, the room was silent. No chuckles, no smirks, just silence. Gabriel spoke first. "I want it built," Brad choked. "Excuse me." Gabriel's eyes locked on him. "Did I stutter?" Brad coughed. "Sir, we'd need more time to review." "You had time," Gabriel said. "She didn't. But she still showed up more prepared than the rest of you combined." No one dared breathe. "And Brad," Gabriel added, his voice laced with venom, "call her sweetheart again, and you'll be applying for assistant roles in Alaska." Natalie stared at him, stunned. Was this really happening? Then Gabriel turned to her, his tone softening, just slightly. "See me in my office." He didn't wait for a reply, just walked back through the private door like a storm retreating. Into itself, the room stayed dead silent. No one moved. Natalie slowly gathered her papers, her head high. When she walked out, she didn't look back. 20 minutes later, CEO's office, she stood in front of a panoramic glass wall, overlooking a city that once felt too big for her. Now, it just looked conquerable. Gabriel poured coffee into 2 ceramic mugs and handed her one without asking. He didn't sit at his desk. Instead, he leaned against it, arms crossed. "You handled that better than I expected," he said. She blinked. "You knew." "I see everything," he said simply. "They've been burying your project for weeks." She clenched her jaw. "Why didn't you stop them?" "Because I wanted to see how far they'd go," she swallowed. "So it was a test?" "No," he said, taking a sip. "It was a hunt." Her brows furrowed. "I like predators," Gabriel said, "but only the smart ones. You didn't bite back too early. You waited, watched, then struck." She looked away. "I didn't feel smart, I felt humiliated." "You were humiliated," he said, "but you turned it into power. That's rare." Natalie didn't know what to say. Her heart pounded. Part confusion, part disbelief, part something else. "I want you on my personal team," he said. Her eyes widened. "You're... what?" "Starting Monday, you report directly to me. I want the project greenlit, expanded, and I want a full report. In 10 days. I'm taking you off the floor." She stared. "Is this, a promotion?" He gave a soft half smile. "It's an escape route." She paused. "And if I say no?" He shrugged. "You go back to the wolves." She looked down at the steaming mug. Her reflection stared back at her, but she looked different, sharper, realer. "I'll take it," she whispered. Gabriel nodded once, but just as she turned to leave, he added one final thing. "Oh, and Natalie?" She looked back. "You should know something," he said. "Brad and the others, they didn't just laugh at you. They tried to bury the files you submitted, deleted shared folders, redirected emails. You were never supposed to get that room. Today." Her blood went cold. "What?" she said, barely audible. "I traced it all," he said. "Every cover-up, every lie." "Why would they?" "Because your model," he said quietly, "would replace 4 of their departments." Her knees weakened slightly. He stepped forward, voice low. "You were never just a threat to their egos, Natalie. You were a threat to their existence." She couldn't breathe, but she nodded. "I want every name," she said. "Every one of them." He looked pleased. "I was hoping you'd say that." Final scene. Cliffhanger. That night, Natalie opened her inbox. One new message. Subject: confidential files, do not share attached. 37 PDFs, all marked with executive initials, deleted reports, time-stamped blocks, digital proof of a corporate takedown attempt. But at the very bottom, one document was different. Untitled.docs. She clicked. It opened to a single line. "They're planning something bigger, and you were never their first target." Then the screen flickered and went black. Natalie's screen stayed black. No cursor, no error, just darkness. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, She wasn't a corporate survivor. She was a woman alone in her apartment, staring into the abyss of a machine that now felt more alive than her own heartbeat. She reached for the power button. Click. The screen came back. Normal. Desktop, as if nothing had happened. She reopened the email. Gone. The untitled .docs file had disappeared. All the other attachments were still there, untouched. Reports, proof, names. But not the message that chilled her to the bone. They're planning something bigger, and you were never their first target. Natalie's stomach turned. She saved the rest of the files to a hard drive and powered off her laptop. Her mind raced. Was it a warning, a trap, or a ghost from inside the company trying to reach her? There were too many possibilities, and only one person who might have real answers. Gabriel's warning. She found him in the executive gym the next morning. The only place he ever seemed less like a billionaire and more like a man exorcising. His demons through reps. Gabriel Thorne stood shirtless, sweat dripping from his shoulders, pounding a 200 LEB bag with fists like he was punching out history. Natalie waited at the doorway. "You're early," he said without turning. "You read the files?" He stopped, breathing hard, then turned to face her. "Every word." "And the last one?" she asked. "The docs file?" He grabbed a towel. "Wasn't in the version I received." Her throat tightened. "Someone sent me a different copy." His eyes sharpened. "Someone who knows more than they should." Natalie nodded. "They said I wasn't their first target." Gabriel exhaled. He walked to the locker, pulled out a flash drive and handed it to her. Names, real names, not just initials. She took it. "What do I do with them?" He looked her dead in the eye. "You don't do anything, not yet." "Why?" "Because you're being watched. There's shadows in the office." That afternoon, Natalie sat at her new desk, smaller than she imagined, tucked away in a glass corner near Gabriel's office, when she noticed something strange. Marla, the polished executive who always kept her distance, was watching her, not just passing glances, full-on calculated observation, the kind that felt rehearsed. Natalie turned in her chair, pretending to look out the window. She waited. When she glanced back, Marla was gone. 2 hours later, the security access logs in the internal system had been cleared for level 6, the server floor. No names. Just wiped. She asked IT. Maintenance, they said. Routine. But she knew. Better. Gabriel's voice echoed in her head. "You're being watched." The man in the suit at 9:48 p.m. As she exited the building, Natalie noticed a black car idling across the street. Not a town car, not an Uber, unmarked. Windows tinted too dark, engine running. She walked slower. The passenger door opened slightly. A man in a dark suit stepped out, face hidden in the glow of a street lamp. He didn't approach. He just stood, watching her. Natalie turned and walked the other way, her pace fast but not running. By the time she looked back, the man and the car were gone. Ghost in the files back home, she loaded Gabriel's flash drive. Folders opened like doors she wasn't supposed to see. Project Raven. Asset. Disposal. Q3 severances. Silent whistleblower suppression. 2022. Natalie S. hands trembled. These weren't just internal memos. They were blueprints for destruction. In Project Raven, she found case files on 3 employees, one from HR, one from tech, one from logistics. Each had tried to push forward cost-saving models. Each was removed quietly, either fired or transferred without notice. The logistics file hit hardest, because the photo attached was Marla. Marla was a whistleblower, but she was still here, alive, elegant, quiet. Natalie blinked, unless she was never supposed to be here either. The betrayal. The next morning, Gabriel summoned her to the rooftop. Not the boardroom, not his office, just the rooftop. A quiet space, wind sharp against her face, with city lights blinking far below. He was already there. "I need to tell you something," he said. She nodded. "I wasn't always CEO," he said. "I inherited this company, but I never wanted it." Natalie furrowed her brow. "I used to believe in what we built," he said, "until I realized the board would rather protect parasites than visionaries." She stepped closer. "You're talking about the files?" He nodded. "They call it cleaning house. I call it killing the future." "Then why keep them around?" she asked. "Why not expose them?" His gaze darkened. "Because the board owns 49%. I own 51. But if I fall, even for one mistake, they take control, and you would be next." She swallowed. "And they've already started," he added. "HR received an anonymous complaint this morning that you threatened an executive." Her jaw dropped. "What?" "Brad," he said, "filed it himself." Natalie felt the rage build in her chest. "I've stalled the investigation," Gabriel said. "But they're going to look for something they can use." She looked at him, her voice low. "Then give me something they can't hide." 7. The USB trap. Natalie returned to her office, a plan forming. She printed a decoy report, filled with dummy figures and false contacts, and saved it to a second USB. Then she accidentally left it on the edge of her desk. 2 hours. Later it was gone. She checked the security feed. At 4:13 p.m., someone entered her office, not Marla. Brad. He wore gloves, used a universal override key, and took the drive. Natalie smiled. It had a tracking worm. By 8:00 p.m., Gabriel had the IP of the external device Brad plugged it into, and the location of a private condo registered to a shell company tied to one of the board members. The secret room. Gabriel and Natalie arrived at the condo with a security team posing as fire inspectors. Inside, they found something chilling: a private server, surveillance monitors, footage of internal staff, recorded calls, biometric logs, and, at the center of it all, a whiteboard with a single phrase written in red marker: "Remove NR by Q2. Failure. Liability." Natalie stared. They weren't just sabotaging her. They were preparing to erase her. The cliffhanger. Later that night, Gabriel called her into his penthouse office. He looked different, tired, bruised by truths he could no longer ignore. "We have the data," he said. "We could take them down." Natalie nodded. "Then let's do it." He hesitated. "There's one thing you should see first." He slid over a sealed envelope. Inside, a photo, dated 4 years ago. In the photo, Gabriel stood in a boardroom. Beside him, smiling, was Marla. She wore a board member's badge. Natalie felt her blood go cold. "She's not a survivor," Gabriel said. "She's one of them. Marla, elegant, quiet, always observing." Natalie stared at the photo Gabriel handed her, a boardroom snapshot from 4 years ago. There she was, Marla, smiling beside Gabriel in a way that didn't just imply friendship, it implied strategy. "Board member," Natalie whispered, stunned. Gabriel nodded slowly. "They call her the glass glove. Looks soft, hits harder than anyone." "She was playing both sides," Natalie murmured. "All this time, she was sent to watch me," Gabriel said. "To control who gets close, who stays, who disappears." Natalie sat down. The weight of betrayal felt like a blade under her ribs. "She was in my office every week," she muttered. "She brought me tea." Gabriel looked away. "That's how she works. She gets close, then she uses your voice against you." Natalie's mind raced. She knew about the USB, about the trap. Gabriel's silence was confirmation enough. Natalie clenched her jaw. "She'll come for me next." "No," Gabriel said. "She already is." Public humiliation. Again. The next morning, Natalie walked into the building and immediately sensed it. Silence with teeth. People looked, whispered. In the elevator, a junior analyst avoided eye contact. In the hallway, Brad smirked as he walked past, tossing her a mocking, "Morning, boss." Then she saw the email. From Board Admin, Internal Subject, Unprofessional Conduct, HR Review, Scheduled. Her stomach sank, Gabriel's voice in her head. Again, they're going to look for something they can use. Natalie stormed into HR. "I want to know who filed this." But the director only looked up at her with tired, rehearsed eyes. "We can't discuss the origin of complaints." Then she added something cold. "You're not the first who tried to play hero, Natalie." Natalie's fists clenched. "But I will be the last." A message in the dust. That night Natalie returned to her apartment late. She dropped her bag and sat on the floor, overwhelmed. She hadn't cried in weeks, not since that day in the boardroom, when the men she trusted laughed at her like she was a child lost in the wrong room. But tonight, the dam cracked. She pressed, her back against the wall, and let the tears fall, quiet, contained. Not weakness, just grief washing out of a body that had held too much for too long. Then she noticed something odd, a streak on her kitchen counter, as if someone had wiped away dust. She hadn't touched that counter in days. She checked her front door, locked. She checked her windows, closed. But one latch was off. Someone had been inside. Her phone buzzed at that exact moment. Unknown number. "Careful what you chase. The hunted can become the hunter." The secret inside Gabriel. She told Gabriel everything. The break-in, the message, the HR complaint. He paced his office like a man unraveling thread from a web he'd spun himself. Then he stopped and said, "There's something I haven't told you." Natalie crossed her arms. "You've said that before." "This is different," he said. "It's about you." Natalie blinked. "Me." He walked to a drawer, opened a hidden panel, and pulled out a file folder. Plain, stamped with the word acquisition. 3 years ago, he said, the company acquired a smaller tech firm, quiet, under the radar. Their algorithms were revolutionary. Natalie's heart started to race. That company was founded by a woman named Andrea Reeves. Her breath caught. "My mother," she whispered. Gabriel nodded. "They silenced her, used her code, then made her disappear." Natalie's face went pale. "You were never just a name on a resume," he said. "They knew exactly who you were. They wanted to erase the last Reeves in the system." She sat, stunned. Everything made sense now. They didn't humiliate her because she was weak. They did it because they were afraid. War Room Gabriel shut the blinds and locked the door. "We go on the offensive now," he said. Natalie stood. "You're ready to burn the house down?" He smiled bitterly. "No, I'm ready to give it new owners." They laid out a plan. Natalie would confront Marla, not with threats, but with evidence. Gabriel would initiate a silent shareholder movement, anonymously leaking board corruption to trigger a trust crisis. A final bombshell report would go public. Everything they had, Project Raven, asset disposal plans, internal surveillance logs. But there was one more step. "We need a fall," Gabriel said. "A what?" "A moment that looks like defeat. Something public, something real. They need to think we're broken, so they don't see what's coming." Natalie hesitated. "You want me to resign?" He shook his head. "No, I will." The face of the enemy. Natalie asked Marla to meet for coffee. Off-site, public, neutral ground. Marla arrived exactly on time, perfectly dressed, smile rehearsed. "You look tired," she said sweetly. Natalie didn't flinch. "You look satisfied." Marla sipped her tea. "I always am." Natalie slid a flash drive across the table. "Your voice is on there, along with Brad's and 2 board members." Marla's hand hovered above it. "Threatening a board member is grounds for legal action. Not if the board forgets who they work for," Natalie said coolly, "and not if the public sees what you've done." Marla's eyes flicked with something sharp, rage disguised as calm. "You think you're different from the others?" she whispered. I am, Natalie said. I don't play to survive. I play to change the rules. Marla leaned back, smiling, then stood, leaving the drive untouched. You won't win, she said, because you're still emotional, and emotion loses. Natalie watched her leave, then whispered, not when it's fueled by truth. 7. The fall 2 days later, headlines exploded. Gabriel Thorne resigns amid shareholder pressure. Internal conflict at Thorne Corp sparks leadership crisis. New interim CEO announced, Marla Hensley. Natalie stood at the back of the press room, watching Marla accept the position with polished grace. She won, someone whispered behind her, but Natalie just smiled. Let her think that. The rise. The next morning, Natalie sent one email to a list of 21 journalists. It contained everything, the real reason behind Gabriel's resignation. The surveillance logs, the whistleblower files, and her mother's erased contribution to the company. By noon, hashtags were trending. Justice for Andrea. Thorne Truth. Board of Lies. Gabriel's secret shareholder move triggered a vote. 5 minority shareholders pulled out, citing ethical disillusionment. Stock prices wobbled. Internal calls leaked. By 6:00 p.m., Marla's face was everywhere, but not as a hero, as a villain. The final confrontation. She came storming into Natalie's office at 8:10 p.m. You think this is over? Marla snapped. Natalie didn't rise from her desk. It's only just begun. You exposed yourself too, Marla said. HR, the emails, the internal breach. I kept everything clean, Natalie interrupted, and I recorded this. 2. She tapped her phone. Recording. On Marla's face crumpled. You stupid little girl, she said, voice venomous. No, Natalie said calmly. Just a daughter, cleaning up what her mother never got the chance to finish. 1. The world was watching. Now by morning, every major outlet had run the story. Natalie's inbox was chaos. Journalists, human rights groups, whistleblower protections, and a dozen women in tech thanking her for finally speaking up. One subject line just read, You said what we couldn't. We see you. Gabriel had vanished from public view, exactly as planned. But behind the curtain, he was pulling every legal, financial, and reputational lever to rip power from the old regime. The board called an emergency meeting that same afternoon. Natalie didn't wait to be invited. She walked in unannounced, not in a suit, not with a lawyer, just wearing black jeans, a white shirt, and her mother's locket around her neck. The room froze. You're not authorized to... One of the executives began. Natalie dropped a stack of printed statements on the table. Then, explain why these are signed by 62% of shareholders, backing a full investigation and interim leadership restructure. Marla sat at the head of the table, her fingers tight around her pen. Her smile was gone. Natalie looked her dead in the eye. You said emotion loses, but I wasn't emotional. I was exact. Her mother's voice that night, alone in her apartment. Natalie pulled out the flash drive Gabriel had given her. It contained old code logs, company data, surveillance archives, but one folder was marked only AR, final voice record. She clicked, and there it was. Her mother's voice, soft, brilliant, still alive in digital echoes. If you're hearing this, it means my work's been stolen. But the ideas were never about me. They were always for something bigger, for the people who get told they're too kind to lead, too soft to win, too young to matter. We don't play their game. We change the board. Natalie wept, not out of sadness, but because something inside her clicked into place. This had never just been about revenge. It had always been about restoration. A reckoning in public. The board was under federal review within 2 weeks. Brad resigned in disgrace after leaked messages surfaced, including him mocking a female employee's suicide as good for budget numbers. 3 other executives were removed after forensic audits revealed falsified expense reports and backdoor deals. Marla, She tried to cling to power, attempted a private settlement, offering Natalie millions in hush money. Natalie refused and released the entire email chain. The backlash was immediate and brutal. A public petition demanded Marla be banned from holding any leadership role in any public company for life. She vanished from social media. Reporters called it one of the most poetic corporate downfalls in modern history. Natalie didn't smile at that. She didn't need to. She had work to do. A new kind of power 3 months later. Thorncorp was under new leadership. And this time, it wasn't a man with a billion-dollar ego. It was a council, 7 members. With equal power and rotating leadership, Natalie was voted in unanimously. She was offered the CEO seat. She declined. Titles didn't protect anyone, she said. Systems will. Instead, she created something new, the Reeves Initiative, a foundation within the company dedicated to rehiring whistleblowers blacklisted by corporate politics, funding women and minority-led startups, tracking workplace harassment, with real-time anonymous reporting tools for the first time in her life. Natalie felt like her voice had weight, not because of her name, but because of her impact. And for the first time, she walked the halls not as someone surviving, but as someone leading. Gabriel returns. He showed up quietly during a rainy evening board session just as she was reviewing the new transparency charter. She turned and saw him in the doorway, hair damp, smiling softly. "You look different," he said. She grinned. "You mean I look like I haven't cried in 3 weeks?" He chuckled. "I meant powerful." They sat, not saying anything for a while. Then Gabriel pulled something from his pocket, a silver key. "What's this?" she asked. "My share. My seat. I want to transfer it to you." Natalie stared at it, then looked at him. "I'm not interested in owning more." "You're not," he said. "You're interested in building more." She took the key. Not for greed, not for status, but for legacy. The final letter one morning, months later, Natalie received a thin envelope with no return address. Inside was a single letter typed in elegant serif font. "Natalie, you don't know me, but I knew. Your mother! She mentored me once when no one else would. I watched her be erased. I did nothing. I was scared. And for that I've lived with shame. But you made her name mean something again, and you gave people like me a second chance to speak. Thank you." There was no name at the end, just a small pressed flower, a violet, her mother's favorite. The last meeting. It was the anniversary of her mother's disappearance. Natalie stood before a group of interns, fresh and nervous and full of dreams. She held up an old picture, her mother smiling beside a whiteboard, surrounded by code and coffee cups. "This woman," Natalie said, "built tools that changed the world. She just never got credit for them." One hand shot up. "Why not?" Natalie paused, then answered softly, "Because sometimes the world doesn't want to admit brilliance when it doesn't look the way they expect it to." "But you changed that," the intern said. Natalie looked down, then smiled. "No, we did." Final scene. Peace is a kind of victory. Too late that night, Natalie sat on her apartment balcony, legs curled under her, sipping mint tea. No phone, no screens, just silence, stars, air that felt new. In her hand, she held her mother's locket. Inside was a photo, Andrea holding baby Natalie, and beneath it, folded neatly, a tiny paper scrap. Gabriel had found it in storage. It was once stuck between her mother's old notes. On it was written a line, "Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are." Natalie whispered it aloud, then closed her eyes and breathed. Final message to the reader. She didn't set out to be a hero. She was humiliated, betrayed, threatened, lied to, forgotten, and still she rose. She didn't just survive. She transformed. For anyone who's ever been told they don't belong, that they're too emotional, too soft, too late, let Natalie's story remind you, you are not too late, you are just in chapter 1.